When I went to K-State, my granddad insisted that I stop by and visit Miles McKee and give him his warm regards. And I knew that he was truly a legendary guy, and I was really nervous to do it. And when I finally worked up the courage to stop by and pass those along, I just felt instantly welcomed by Miles's warm smile. And his grin broadened, and he said, "Well, how is young Billy?" And then my grin broadened because young Billy had just turned 9 and he was doing really well. But it was easy to see how Dr. McKee helped rural students shrink a city like Manhattan down to a small, caring community. Nelson Mandela once said, "A good head and a good heart is a formidable combination." And that's exactly how I would describe Miles. He was on the national championship judging team and became the K-State herdsman, but he also received numerous awards for teaching and advising. Not only did he raise the bar on general excellence in selecting and breeding better beef across the state, but he helped raise up generations of agriculturalists, lifting and loving and training them to become the best that they could be. My gratitude today is overwhelming. First, to Dr. McKee for his lifetime spent in the beef industry. Secondly, to the McKee family for coming a long way and sharing with them our mutual love and respect for their father. I also want to thank all of the alumni and K-State faculty that are here to share their stories and recollections today. Finally, thank you to Pioneer Bluffs for this opportunity to honor Dr. McKee and treasure and archive his legacy. This act is a valuable gift to the future and a representative of the best of our ranching heritage. To all of you, I believe this work is important, and I thank you for being here today. As for so many generations before in my family, it has been a delight working with the McKees. They continue to bring a warmth and wit to the world that honors and is a living legacy to Miles and Marjorie. Their children are all here today. We have Rich. Will you stand up for us? Okay. We have Rich and Anel and John and Dave. It feels like somewhere between divine intervention and very good luck that we were able to meet a few years ago. Their Aunt Jane was an oversized influence on my youth, and to this day, my respect for their father continues to grow. It felt like an instant bond to share such tender affections for these gone but not forgotten McKee siblings. Today, Miles' son Dave McKee will be sharing with us his talk entitled The Legacy of Dr. McKee. Dave comes to us from Sheridan, Wyoming, and he is a retired Forest Service archaeologist and tribal liaison, and he is the current president of the not-for-profit Fort Phil Kearny Bozeman Trail Association. How lucky could we be that he is using his considerable experience in honoring the past to connect us with his father? We are so grateful.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad to be back in the Flint Hills. I come back about once or twice a year to visit my brother Rich, and we ride on the Flint Hills Trail. It's become a passion of ours. And when I'm riding through these rolling hills, it brings a lot of childhood memories back. So I'm very grateful to be back. I still call it home. I always say I'm going home, even though I've been gone my entire adult life. So today, on behalf of my brothers Rich and John, and my sister Nell and all our families, I'd like to share some memories of our father, Miles McKee. My story is from one child's perspective and memory. So when I finish, I'm hoping that people will come up and share their perspectives and memories of Dad. We would really appreciate it. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Annie Wilson and Katie Wilson Hancock for inviting us to come be a part of this celebration. It means a lot to us. I also like to thank Pioneer Bluffs for their excellent work. And as you just heard, I'm in the same activity of historic preservation and a nonprofit organization. So kudos to you folks. And I'd like to give a very special thanks to Annie and Jane Cawthorn for recording the interviews with our Aunt Jane and our dad, Miles. These interviews are a gift to our family. Really appreciate it. So Dad had a positive influence on countless number of people through the generations, which all of you know. Likewise, he was shaped and influenced by a large number of people, many as well, such as Dad Weber and Don Good at Kansas State. His mother's sister, May Miles Colt, and from this community, as well as the Mushrush family, the Stout family, and the Moxley family, just to name a few. But as I go through this, I like to mention just a couple of key individuals that influenced Dad in addition. So we'll start with his mother, Nell Miles McKee, from Garden City, Kansas. Some of Dad's recollections, he revered his mother deeply and greatly. I think she had the greatest influence on him as a young man and as a boy. And he remembers that she would love to go swimming with the kids in Middle Creek at the swimming hole. She also had a piano at the ranch house and played piano, and she played piano at the old Methodist church for services. And I'm sure that's where Dad developed his love for playing a piano, which is a key talent to have, which I'll show in a couple of slides. But as Annie mentioned, Nell passed away in 1943 after a long illness with cancer. And so Dad, when she passed, said, from now on, I would like to be known as Miles. And so he was known as Miles in honor of his mom after that. And that honoring continued when my sister was born, and he and Mom named her Annelle after Ann McKee, his grandmother, who came to help when Nell got sick, and Nell. So we continue that tradition with Ann and Nell. Next to influence, Dad was his wife, our mother, Marjorie. She was the daughter of Dudley and Elsie Fisk of Cottonwood Falls. And he was the love of Dad's life, and she was the foundation of all he accomplished. And she was always that quiet, solid, keep it on even ground. We'll come back to her. And then third, his sister Jane, our Aunt Jane, who loved each other, although they were very different in their demeanor and their character. There was only really one thing they had in common, and that's when they were playing spades against my brothers and I, or my brother-in-law Gary, and they both had an evil laugh, and they were card sharks. They loved trouncing us. So that's the one thing they had in common. In Dad's interviews with Annie and Jane, he talked about being in 4-H as the key for what was going to be his pathway in adulthood. So with the Emerald 4-H Club, participating in the judging teams, visiting many of the ranches, and I'll bet the 4-H Club came here to visit. He was on the state championship demonstration team with Andrew Drummond and Earl Wood. And as he told them in his interview, it was being in 4-H that fundamentally set his career in the cattle industry. So I pick up Dad's story when they had to move to Cottonwood Falls to go to high school. So this is a picture of the Chase County High School Bulldog 1947 yearbook. And when it was time to move there, first Dad and then Jane, they had to find room and board in town. So his dad, Tom, went into the bank and asked Roy Mushrush where Dad might be able to stay and board while he was in high school. So Roy and Blanche took Miles in to stay with them for about 2.5 years. With their son, Bob Mushrush. And so Dad and Bob became lifelong friends forever. To finish high school, then he was taken in by the Stout family. So Elmore and Doris Stout took him in. And Stanley was just a little toddler at the time. So it was here in high school that Mom and Dad met at Chase County High School. And I mentioned the piano playing. So Dad was a good piano player. Mom was a really good piano player, and their piano teacher said, "We'd like you two students to play a duet together." So they did. And I don't know if they were sitting at the same keyboard, but I always imagined if they were. Dad was a good piano player, but Mom was really good. So I always imagined when they were starting to figure out the duet, if they accidentally bumped hands, Mom did it on purpose. The other thing I wanted to remember was, as an archaeologist, I've looked at a lot of artifacts over my career, but my favorite artifact of all time is my mom's scrapbook. And it's the most complete, wonderful scrapbook you'd ever see. And my favorite thing in there is a folded wrapped Wrigley's gum wrapper, which was the wrapper from her first date with Dad. So that was just, yeah. So that's where they met and developed their longtime partnership and love. So they finished high school, and Dad heads off to Kansas State University. And when they first got there, he got a job working at the barn, and he got a bunk bed and a hot plate, and was in what's now the old dairy barn. And that's where he landed when he first got there. And then they entered farmhouse, was a member of Blue Key Society. Of course, all the good ag students would be showing at the Little American Royal. So there's Dad in 1948 showing a little Hereford bull at the Little American Royal. He was also part of the judging team that won the first place in the national contest in 1950 at the livestock exhibition in Chicago. I love this picture. In the center is Lord Digby of the Royal Agricultural Society of England, and he's presenting the trophy to Don Good, the coach. And then from the left in the picture is Dad, John Slender, Bob Mushrush, and Marvin Smith. And from the right are team members Dale Hanlon and Mike Murphy. Upon graduation, Dad enlisted in the Marines and was getting ready to go to Korea. Mom headed to, she had been at Emporia State Teachers College and got her music teaching degree. So Dad headed to the Marines, basic training in California, and then officer training. Mom got a job as a music teacher at the school in Lincoln, Kansas. He was completing officer training in the winter and around Christmas of 1951. And for a Christmas present, Mom sent him her portrait. That was her Christmas present to him. So he finishes officer school, or about to finish, but he stops off back in Cottonwood Falls and they get married in June of 1952. Well, June 22nd, tomorrow, is the anniversary. I love the picture on the left because even as older adults, those are two of my favorite expressions that they would have. And while Dad was in Korea, Mom was teaching in Lincoln at the school there, teaching music. So upon graduation, Dad comes back, and the first job they get is working for the Moxley Ranch. And they stayed in that house, which I took a picture of from the Flint Hills Trail when I was riding my bicycle. And I don't think the garage was on there, Tom. But anyway, that was his first job out of the Marines. And Tom told Rich that when he was a little boy, he'd run down the road from the family home to see if Mom had baked any fresh cookies. And so he'd want to look in the cookie jar. So after working for the Moxleys, Dad and Mom, and I was a little baby at the time, we moved to the Fairfax, Missouri, and worked on the Lockhart farm. And then we moved to the L&J Crusoe Ranch in Sheboygan, Michigan. And then in 1959, Dad came back and got the job as the beef herdsman at Kansas State University. And of course, showing cattle and having cattle for the classes was a big deal. So here's a picture with Dad and the champion Shorthorn Senior Bowl at the National Western Stock Show in '65. And then later on that year, they took their Shorthorn steer down to Fort Worth for the National Exposition, and they won champion steer down there. And I might be wrong, but I think the gentleman standing next to Dad is Pete Hawkins, the breeder. Anyway, when he was the beef herdsman, we lived in the herdsman's house, which is, if you've been up to K-State lately, it's where the big MBAF building is now. So the herdsman's house is gone. But boy, those were our formative years. So there's Dad and Rich and me and our old dog Jill. And those were wonderful years. And in those times that Mom had let us scamper up the hill up to the beef barn. So we'd go out with Dad and help him feed. And one of my great memories of Dad is if we went early to help him water and feed, we'd be walking towards the pens. And if you knew Dad, he loved to sing. And then one of his favorite movies was the musical Oklahoma. And so we'd be walking to the pens and he'd always start singing, "Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day." And that's a big memory I have. And that was just about outlook on life. So remember that. I talked about having artifacts. My favorite artifact that I have, when they tore the beef barn down, Dave Nichols had these plaques made from the arches, the beams. And Dave, where are you sitting? Thank you. And this is a big memory for me because it's a memory of being a little kid. And one of the magic words that Mom and Dad would say, "Yeah, you go up to the beef barn and be up there with the boys at the barn." And for me, that was just one word, the boys at the barn. And we remember a couple of them, Pat Coons and Gene Raymond. When we were little kids, they'd sit on a bale of hay and they'd put us on their knee and we'd play rodeo. And we would be bucking off their knees. I just remember running around the barn. I remember the sense of community that the animal science department had. And they would have Christmas parties at Weber Hall. And Jane Good and the Richardsons and the Menzies, they would put up the tree and you'd bring the kids in and we'd have snacks and little presents. And then in the summer, we'd always have a barbecue, sometimes at the Top of the World, and other times at the zoo in Manhattan, set up the volleyball net and have a barbecue. And seems like us and Craig Good were always running around trying to get in trouble. But it was about a sense of community. And so this plaque gives me those memories. So I cherish it. So in 1968, well, 67, 66, Don Good convinced Dad that he needed to get his doctoral degree so he could get on faculty and really use his talents to advise and teach students. So we went off to Lexington, Kentucky for, 16 months or something like that, where he got his PhD and came back to Weber Hall and he started working as an advisor and a teacher. And of course, he really excelled at both things and won a number of awards. But the real story is his sense of loyalty to Kansas ranch families and wanting to help the next generation succeed as best he could. That's kind of my favorite picture of Dad teaching because that's it in a nutshell. They did some summaries, and they think that over his 46-year career at K-State, that he advised over 2,500 students and taught over 15,000 students. And that covers about 3 generations plus a little bit. Of course, I can't tell the story of Miles McKee without including Collier Miles McKee, the bull. And I want to tell this story because it's a reflection on Dad and back to sense of community. So Kyle and Katie Collier came down from Idaho to go to school to Dad from Collier Herefords in Idaho. And they were so enamored with Dad that they said, if we ever have a bull that we think is special, we're going to register him as Miles McKee. So they got a bull, and they said this one looks pretty good. So they registered him as Miles McKee, and said, well, we're going to go show him. So they're going to take him to the Denver Stock Show. So thinking about faculty community, so this is the gang that hatched a scheme. So standing from the left is David Ames, who was on faculty at K-State with Dad, and then he went to Colorado State as department head. In the middle is Ken Odie, who was department head at K-State, animal science. And Scott Shockey on the right, I think he was herdsman at the time. And then sitting from the left, Dave Nichols, and in the middle, Hunter, Melvin Hunt, and Dad. So the scheme they hatched is they knew how much the Collier kids, the Collier family, and Dad cared about each other. So the scheme was they were going to take Dad to Denver in secret, and then they were going to wait till the judging was over, and then Dad was going to walk out into the arena and greet the Collier kids. Oh, and as the story goes, so they're hiding Dad, and right before the Bulls show, Kyle Collier came into the restroom, and Dad was hiding in the restroom. And Dad said, I scurried into one of the stalls and I hid until Kyle left. And so C. Miles McKee was the champion Hereford bull of the Hereford show. Gave him the ribbons, and then Dad walked out. And it was quite a reunion with the Collier kids. I think at the time, and then they auctioned C. Miles McKee, and at the time, I think he held the world record for an auction bull, and I think it was $600,000. And I love this picture because Dad never stopped teaching for a minute, so I know he's instructing the Collier kids. But that's just a story about the fellowship of the faculty and the love of the students and the families around this bull. Upon retirement, Dad stayed active in the department, and he started this project to write the Building the Legacy, a history of the Kansas State University Department of Animal Science and Industry. So he conducted archive research for 5 years, and he archived over 3,500 historic photos with the whole idea of putting this down on paper, the commitment and the philosophy of teaching the next generation of producers, agricultural producers. That was his philosophy. So he wanted to put that in on paper. It's a wonderful piece of work. Mom and Dad stayed active in retirement. Dad sang in the choir at the First Presbyterian Church. He volunteered to work as a greeter at the church. His other great passion in retirement was picking apples. And he had apple trees, and he would sit on the sun deck for hours peeling apples, and Mom would make applesauce and apple pie fillings. And one of the legacy of the McKees is all the boys know how to make scratch apple pies. That's Mom. And Mom, she played organ and piano, sometimes for services, but for the youth choir for many years. And also served as a deacon at the First Presbyterian Church. So they still stayed real active that way. I always admire my parents. I love my parents, but I admire them more than anything because they were the example of never talking the talk, but every day they walked the walk in just a beautiful way. They also did a little bit of traveling, and of course, it's because they got grandchildren. Dad never was always uncomfortable vacationing, but if you could go see the grandkids, he could do that. Oh, I love this picture because you'd have to be there to listen to Dad. I think this is a photo album, but he's making up a story and he's got characters and character voices going. And on the left is Rich's son, Michael, and on the right is my son, Miles. Family trips. So here's one they took with the Danzig clan to Washington, D.C.
Almost as hot there that day as here.
Yes. Here's one that they came to visit me in Wyoming when I was working on the medicine bows. So, yeah, it was, I love to travel. Okay, I'm coming back to Jane Lehman. Our story's not complete without Aunt Jane, and neither is Dad's. So, she followed Dad to K-State, and she was going to do English literature. She wanted to write, and took classes from Professor Russell Lehman, who wrote Manifest Destiny, and then she ended up marrying Russ. And Jane and Russ, that's another one-word thing. Dad would say, you're gonna go stay with Jane and Russ, one word. And we would go with them up to their cabin near Concordia on the Republican River. Jane and Russ, they taught us how to fish, how to hunt. And I joke, if you know Jane, she taught me how to spit, drink beer, and cuss a little bit. She was a teacher and so here's a picture. We were at Jane's and Russ's pond on their property north of Manhattan. And so they always had this standing thing with all the neighbors as the kids could always come fish for free. And there's some more of the Danzig clans. Michael, I see you in there. And there's Dad standing back there with Jane. But for them, it was just getting the kids outdoors and having family time. So first thing Jane did was she became a teacher. She got her teaching degree, and she taught at Junction City, and she taught the kids who'd been kicked out of school, the alternative school kids. And those kids were rough, and they loved her. And she was a tough love teacher. And I think she quit finally because the administration just didn't have compassion for those kids and the backgrounds they came from. But she was a great teacher, a great mentor for those kids, and tough love. So then she got interested in dog training and dog breeding, and she took that tough love teaching attitude to work in her labs. And but I think the tough love was more on owners than it was on the dogs. And I can tell you, because I still have a Lehman dog, and my brother-in-law Gary can tell you, we both got some tough love about how to be good owners. We did. The dogs are in one piece, but she loved to train. And she trained both, for field trial and for hunting. And then she started hunting deer. I think when we were kids, there weren't any deer around. We didn't have a hunting season. And then she took up hunting deer. She loved hunting, but what she really liked more than shooting the deer was the stock. So she became a wildlife photographer. And it was just like Jane. One day she announced, I'm going to become a wildlife photographer and I'm going to sell my pictures. And there was a lot of poo-poo stuff, and she did. And she took pictures and framed them, and she went to the trade shows and sold her pictures. But she loved the stock. And she loved photographing deer. I think you've already seen the next one a little bit today, but her most famous one is Arches. I think her lasting legacy is after Russ had passed, and she put their land up there north of Manhattan in a conservation easement with Fort Riley. And she wanted to preserve the tall grass prairie ecosystem and save it from development. She wanted to preserve, there was a prairie chicken booming ground right there. And she took some pretty good pictures of the boys booming on that. And she also stipulated that cattle would always graze that. And she knew that in prehistoric times, the bison helped maintain the ecosystem, and now it was going to be cattle that grazed and maintained it. So I think that's her legacy. And I think the other piece in that agreement is that kids can come and fish in the ponds for free. I'm going to finish up. So after Dad's great services in September of 2021, we decided we'd get into some comfortable clothes and we'd come down and we'd go visit our grandparents at the Cottonwood Cemetery and then come over to Elk Union to see Nell and Tom and just drive by the ranch. So we're driving by and my brother-in-law Gary says, let's pull in. And I'm being my dad and I'm going, I don't want to bother anybody. No, pull in. So we pulled in 3 carloads of McKees. And first Katie comes out and then Travis comes out, and it kind of got this, who are these people, lost tourists? And it was the perfect connection because y'all were getting ready to put together the scrapbook on the ranch and you're getting ready for the celebration. And it's like, well, we were supposed to meet. So I always want to really thank Katie and Travis for being such gracious hosts as all these complete strangers come piling out of cars. I just want to conclude by saying Mom and Dad as a team had a wonderful life. They were very giving and were very valued by their various communities. And although they spent most of their years away from Chase County, what we do know is that foundation of who they were was formed here, and they always came back to visit, and they never lost that philosophical, that spiritual connection to this country and these people. So I'll stop there. Thank you for having us.
Westward we go, toward the last buffalo, to the high plains of sturdy short grass, where the great southern herd still a sight beyond words, as it covers the prairie so vast.